Hey everybody. All right, Wes and I are here at the Pennsylvania Monument. We're going to start out today at the 114th placard here of who fought and what guys were here at the battlefield. We're going to walk out here a second and I'll give you a brief on where we're going to go, how we're going to walk the battlefield. But I just wanted to start here at the plaque commemorating the men who fought here. For me personally, my ancestor was Henry Smallbrook. They have his name as Harry, but it's actually Henry Smallbrook. He was a sergeant here at Gettysburg, got part of his right thumb shot off. His first sergeant, a guy named Mace, was actually killed here. And then as a result, Henry Smallbrook became the first sergeant. His picture's all over the internet. So let's go out next to show you. We're gonna give you a rundown of where we're gonna walk to and how we're gonna finish up here. All right, follow us. Okay, so we represent the 114th Pennsylvania. Collis Zouaves is originally founded in 1861 as an independent company by a gentleman by the name of Charles Collis in Philadelphia. He eventually, in 1862, he rose it from a company level, which was roughly 100 guys, up to, he recruited another 900 guys to form a full regiment. The Zouaves are based off of French African Army uniforms that the U.S. Army had adopted. Roughly 1 in 10 people within the U.S. Army were Zouaves. Today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be hiking down Cemetery Ridge Road just prior to getting to Little Round Top. We're going to walk up to the Peach Orchard area to the Sherphy Farm where the 114th fought here at Gettysburg. From there, we're going to follow the route they took generally as they retreated, and then finishing where they helped support the defeat of Pickett on July 3rd. Okay, so to my right, this is the wood lot, roughly somewhere in this vicinity. The night of July 1st, the 114th Pennsylvania had marched up from Emmitsburg, made a turn somewhere near the Peach Orchard, and then they were moved into that area to bivouac for the night of July 1st. During the morning of July 2nd, their defensive position was in this wood line somewhere, but then General Dan Sickles, their corps commander, he wanted to go up, push forward up to the high ground, which is where the current Peach Orchard is now. We're going to go out there to that point, but this was their start point on the afternoon of July 2nd to push out to where they would eventually get engaged by Barksdale's brigade. Now, after they were defeated and they were being pushed back all along the line, roughly where we're at, up to where the angle is, you had a trickle of different scattered members of the 114th would eventually come back into this long area, this rough, I don't know, half mile to 3/4 mile area. The guys would come in and they would eventually reconsolidate up at the top near where the angle is. But this is where they were retreated back to, from here all the way up through after they were defeated. But that was the whole corps. So you had this massive humanity of thousands of guys coming through, mixed units coming back. But we're going to talk more about that when we get out to the Sherphy Farm. Okay? So you can see the Pennsylvania Monument in the back. We're coming down, it's called like United States Avenue or the Trostle Farm Lane, basically. We start, and this is generally the route the 114th made as they were going up to the Sherphy Farm in the Peach Orchard area. But after the battle, when they were defeated and they were kicked off the battlefield and they were falling back through this area or up over to my right up there, the Barksdale's brigade were making, that was the unit that defeated the 114th as well as other elements of the 3rd Corps. They were pushing through this area. This is where the big fight came, and you're talking about a mile to a mile and a half of movement that this brigade of Confederates came from Mississippi that came through this area. And then they were generally stopped somewhere up in here by reinforcements of the 2nd Corps that came up and just, they had to trade it themselves. Too many casualties, running low on ammunition, and then they were just stopped along with some other Confederate brigades that were pushed further up to our right. So we're going to continue on up here right by the Trostle Farm where Dan Sickles was wounded. So, all right. What you're seeing here, all this nice lovely grass, it shouldn't be here. Like during the battle, this was all like chewed down by cattle or whatever. So you can see like this one rock sitting up there, but in reality, this whole area was just full of rocks. So it wasn't a very good position to have artillery to shoot down, and that might have been part of the motivation of Dan Sickles to move his corps forward, because he didn't have a good artillery platform to engage as well as an infantry platform to maneuver. Some people have different opinions. I'm just like, I don't know, buddy, you didn't really make the right decision, but so he moved forward. I think this is the position. Hold on. Yeah. This is it. Oh, look, someone put an apple in there. Yeah, so this guy, I'm not going to go into all the details, but this unit, the 9th Massachusetts Battery, Captain Bigelow's battery, these guys were like the fields, this doesn't do it justice. Like, you can see some rocks, but there were like stone walls and around this area. But as the 3rd Corps was pushed back, these guys were like firing their guns, and as they would fire their guns, they would retreat by recoil. So the gun would fire, and the cannoneers would hold the ropes and run with the cannon as it was going back. They weren't stopping it. But these guys were like a last-ditch effort, because behind, or to my front, which you can't see, when the 3rd Corps broke, they had to have some kind of delayed withdrawal, and these guys were the only ones that were available, and they were like firing canister, which is like big shotgun shells, into the onrushing Confederates. But I'm not going to go on the detail, but the heroic action of the guys from Massachusetts with the artillery pieces, just absolutely amazing. But we're just walking by. This is the Trostle Farm. We're going to continue up, and if you actually look at the barn up there, you can see there's still a cannonball hole in the barn there. So there's a scene in the movie Gettysburg where you see the actor who's playing John Reynolds. He comes running across the field like it's supposed to be the first day, and like, oh, John Reynolds is here. He's saving the day with the 1st Corps. But if you look in the background, you see a barn. It's actually that barn. I'm like, that's not the right part of the battlefield. So let's continue on. Oh, and this is the area where Dan Sickles, who was the 3rd Corps commander, had his headquarters during the afternoon of July 2nd. So, and there's a monument to that up here. All right, so Dan Sickles, we're going to talk about him for a hot second. He was the Corps commander, okay? You had like armies, like Army of the Potomac, and then within that you had corps. So like 1st Corps, 2nd, 3rd Corps, whatever. Corps were roughly 10 to 15,000 men. Then they usually had 3 divisions. Now, at the time of the battle, the 3rd Corps only had 2 divisions, okay? Dan Sickles, he was a political general. He had started, I believe, as maybe a regimental commander or a brigade commander of the Excelsior Brigade out of New York. He was a politician, and I think he was known, he wasn't true to his wife. He messed around, and his wife was very unhappy in the marriage. She got into a relationship with, I believe, it was Francis Scott Key's grandson. And Sickles didn't like that. It was okay for him to cheat on his wife, but not for his wife to cheat on him. So he shot him on the streets of Washington. And the story goes, I believe he claimed temporary insanity, and he got off on it. So he was this political guy. Anyway, when the war breaks out, he uses his political influence. He eventually raises to become a Corps commander. At the Battle of Chancellorsville, his Corps was in a really tough position, and they fought very well. And he did okay, but when he got here, he was not a fan of George Meade, and like, he tried to talk to Meade or some of his subordinates to say, hey, the position you gave me up on Cemetery Hill Ridge was not good. And eventually, under his own initiative, he moved forward to some higher ground out here where the peach orchard was. Unfortunately, Sickles, a lot of people give him criticism for it. He didn't recognize that it was like dead ground or neutral ground, as Meade would make a comment, because it was between the lines, between where artillery could engage him. So he moved his corps forward. However, he didn't have enough men to cover the area which he wanted to secure. And as a result, his unit, or the 3rd Corps, would get rolled up. So on the afternoon of July 2nd, as his corps was being defeated and pushed back, you can see the soft rolling hills in front of us. It's actually a higher elevation to my front. He was here observing what was going on, trying to rally men, and a Confederate artillery shell came in, and I believe it hit his right leg and shattered his leg. So he was in severe pain. They took a leather strap, gave him a tourniquet, put him on a gurney to get him out of here, and he kind of propped himself up and got a cigar out and started smoking a cigar so the men wouldn't be demoralized, because they thought, the men generally liked him. They thought he was an okay guy, but he was definitely a political guy. He was a character. So they took him off the battlefield, and then he lost his leg. His leg would actually be it's still on display down in Washington, D.C. I forget which museum, but he would go visit his leg a lot after the war. And there was a story where he actually wanted to get part of his leg bone to be turned into like a walking cane. Like, like, who uses your own amputated leg bone? But it never happened because part of his leg was missing. Like, they only had a certain portion of it, but it's there. You can see how his leg got shattered. But that was Dan Sickles. But with his wounding and with the amount of humanity from the Confederate side that had massed against his corps, that he just couldn't hold this area. And it actually disrupted Meade's defensive line, which would cause horrendous casualties for the 2nd Corps, as well as the 5th Corps, who would wind up fighting down the Devil's Den area, the wheat field, up around the Rose Farm. That was never intended for Meade to any combat to happen there, but Sickles completely messed up or misunderstood his orders, which then caused the annihilation of his corps. But for all those mistakes, he got the Medal of Honor. All right, let's move on to the next site. The 3rd Corps, though, like, as a group, the men really liked, you know, they really identified with it. I know after, when the 3rd Corps in I think it was the fall, or in 1864, the 3rd Corps was dissolved, and the elements were scattered amongst other corps, and the men of the 3rd Corps were pretty upset. They were still allowed to wear their corps badges, but they still identified as 3rd Corps men, and they were really proud of their unit. Did you see the passenger? He was like looking at us going, like, who are those guys? I had one person, I don't know if I told you this, Chris. I had one guy ask me, he goes, are you guys like, are you a Revolutionary War reenactor? That's what he honestly thought I was. Like, no.
People aren't familiar with the uniform.
Well, no, yeah, so. And that was the point, you stick out.
Yeah.
And people say, like, you wore red pants, you blah, blah. Like, yeah, I know, it's not up to me. Like, it was Charles Collis came up with this outfit.
Right.
Now, our pants are more like regular, the red ones are more regular pant looking, but some of the guys, like 5th New York, or they had like these poofy, like MC Hammer pants. Like, those were interesting. Let's push it, all right. But yeah, these are more comfortable to walk in. The afternoon of July 2nd, the 3rd Corps had moved up here to the Emmitsburg Road. The ironic thing is the night before, they had actually walked up the Emmitsburg Road and made a turn to go up to Cemetery Ridge, to camp. So they just came back out this way. Now, the 114th was actually further back, maybe a little bit below the slope there, and the Confederates, which are directly to my front, if you turn around a little bit, in that wood line is where Longstreet's Corps was, and that's where the Mississippi Brigade was. But there was an artillery duel, you can pan back toward me, there was an artillery duel that took place for about an hour or so between Union artillery and Confederate artillery, and the infantry of Graham's brigade, which the 114th was a part of, had to endure it. And then to my left, when there was attack in echelon, when you had Hood's division down toward the Rose Farm to push up to the Devil's Den, you had Kershaw's brigade come out, and they started engaging elements of the 3rd Corps in amongst the peach orchard. Now, the peach orchard today, you can see, it's up here on this little rise. This was a good artillery platform, and there's some peach trees behind me. But it actually stretched to my right as well, okay? This is where the gentleman named Sherphy, the Sherphy Farm was area where the fighting would take place. He owned this peach orchard, okay? So, this battery was Battery E of the 1st Rhode Island Artillery. Now, these guys had a relationship with the 114th. Months prior, at the Battle of Fredericksburg on December 13th, 1862, this battery was in a forward position and was threatened to be captured by Georgia troops. Well, an officer said, hey, can you save the battery? Well, the 114th charged and saved the battery back in 1862, December of 1862. We're in the same situation again here at Gettysburg, okay? So the battery is forward. They're having this artillery exchange with the Confederate artillery, and then the brigade of Barksdale's Mississippi Brigade comes out of that wood line, and they start assaulting through here. The battery was again in danger of being overrun. The 3rd Corps artillery, chief of artillery, a captain, I forget his name, he said something to the effect to the 114th, hey, you saved the battery at Fredericksburg, will you do it again? And it's at that point where the 114th will then move forward to protect this battery from being captured. To my left, you had the 68th Pennsylvania Infantry. They were kind of hanging out there in the breeze, and their lines were not interconnected. There was a gap between them. But with the 114th moving forward and the rest of the brigade moving forward, it allowed the Battery E of the 1st Rhode Island to extricate themselves from the situation. Part of the fence line had been knocked down by some of the pioneers of the 114th, so they were able to come forward. But the rest had to clamber over the white picket fence over there to the right. We're going to move down to the Sherphy farm now, but in this area where we're standing, to my right, is generally where the 114th was. And I personally think my ancestor was somewhere in this area between the battery and the barn where he got wounded. And the reason why I think this is because his company commander, a guy named Lieutenant Dunkel, who would later become Captain Dunkel, would be captured. And this is where most of the pressure came from the Mississippians. The 13th, the 17th, 18th Mississippi came this way with Barksdale's charge, with the 21st Mississippi off to my left, pushing through this portion of the Peach Orchard and down the Peach Orchard Road, flanking the 3rd Corps. All right, so let's move over down toward the Sherphy farm. Okay, so we're now standing on the ground of the Sherphy farm near the house and the barn behind me. So roughly to my front, about 20 yards, maybe a little less, that was the right flank of the 114th Pennsylvania. As I mentioned earlier, the artillery chief, Captain Randolph, I have forgotten his name now, I remember, of the 3rd Corps had asked the 114th to move forward to ensure that the Battery E of the 1st Rhode Island wasn't taken by the Mississippians. So to my front, again, 20 yards to my front, that's where the 57th Pennsylvania was. And in this farmyard where the house is and the barn behind me, this was a whirlwind of combat, because the Mississippians were coming up through here. Behind the barn was the left flank of the 114th. That was crumbling in, and basically they were here, and then they turned. They just did this, and they just fell back. Now, elements of New York regiments came up to try to support the crumbling of Graham's brigade, which the 114th was a part of, but they just couldn't stop the Mississippians coming through here. For the 114th, they used this side of the wall of the rise of the barn, basically like a trench line, like you would see in World War I. A bunch of Zouaves were back there, and they were just annihilating the Mississippians. But because behind them to their left, they were flanked, the guys were pushed out of that position, and they had to fall back from here. And then as a result, the 3rd Corps line just crumbled, and we're where the 1st Division was, and then the 2nd Division was further down the Emmitsburg Road, and just the Confederates of Longstreet's Corps just rolled up. It was the Hood's Division and of McLaws's division just rolled up the left flank of the 3rd Corps, which then caused the whole Corps to withdraw back up into Cemetery Ridge, where they originally started with. Now for the 114th, Captain Bowen was in command. Technically it was Lieutenant Colonel Cavada, and he was second in command of the regiment at the time. What happened was Colonel Collis, Charles Collis, had gotten really sick at the Battle of Chancellorsville, like from typhoid fever or malaria or something, but he was really sick and he was recovering in Philadelphia at the time. So Cavada, who was second in command, he was kind of ghosting. Like he did the same thing at Fredericksburg, and he did the same thing at Chancellorsville, and now he was supposed to be in charge, and he wasn't really around where he should have been up with the men. So the senior captain, Captain Bowen, who would later become Major Bowen, and I believe unofficially Lieutenant Colonel Bowen, was in command of the unit, and he ordered them to withdraw up the Emmitsburg Road, because if they fell directly back, the Confederates were just rolling into that area, so they had to go someplace safe to secure the flag. And there's some paintings showing the withdrawal from this area. After the Confederates came through this area, you had a bunch of wounded gentlemen from both sides that were here, but Zouaves and wounded Confederates went inside the barn here, and later, I believe on July 3rd, artillery from the Union Army hit that barn, and the barn burned. So a number of Zouaves who were in there who were wounded, hadn't been cared for, died as a result of the barn burning on them. And there are unknown Zouave graves up at the cemetery, which later on we're going to go see. On the, I believe it was like July 5th, I think it's July 5th, after the Confederates had withdrawn, the 20th Maine, Joshua Chamberlain, Little Round Top fame, their men came through this area to secure it as they were moving forward to check to see where the Confederates were. And they made comments about seeing the Zouaves, the dead Zouaves around here, and the burned bodies, the charred bodies of the Zouaves that were left in the barn. But this was a pretty rough fight. The 57th Pennsylvania, they actually had occupied parts of the Sherphy house and were shooting out of it. I think there was a case one of their captains jumped out of a window to get away, and the Confederates were right outside the window and bayoneted the guy to death. So it was a pretty rough fight. Yeah, and this whole place was just laid waste by combat. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to march up the, we're going to retreat up the Emmitsburg Road, and we're going to make a turn. And I think I know where Cavada, the lieutenant colonel who was kind of ghosting, where he would eventually just sit down and just, he was too tired to continue the retreat and eventually be captured. So let's head up that way. Yeah. The Zouave uniforms are nice in the sense that, like, you can look at a uniform and be like, oh, that's the whatever Illinois Zouaves, or that's the such and such. They all have a distinctness to them. Some of them, like the 72nd Pennsylvania, they just have extra buttons and like a red trim on their coat and like white gaiters. Like, some Zouaves aren't very ornate. Like, ours are ornate, but some guys are just like, just a little bit here, a little bit there, but they're still considered, quote, Zouaves.
Right, and then they're chasseur uniforms.
Yeah,
they usually get just lumped in with the Zouaves, but they're different. Like the 14th Brooklyn.
Yeah, exactly. Because then they had kepis, didn't they?
Yeah, they wore kepis.
Yeah.
They had, I think they might have worn shell jackets too, but I might be wrong about that.
Yep. So now we just got to find somewhere breaking the fence here, and we'll cut across. Klingel house or Klingel farm. Okay, I think this is it. Okay, so now we're on the Klingel farm. This is the vicinity of the left flank of the 2nd Division, but the 114th retreated up into this area somewhere. Captain Bowen getting the flag back. Colonel Cavada, the guy I was telling you who was ghosting, well, he shows back up, and somewhere back here, I believe either behind this barn or in one of the buildings, somewhere around here, he pretty much just sat down and said, I'm too tired, I can't go on. But due to the nature of the combat and the rush of the soldiers, Captain Bowen's like, okay, pal, bye, I'll see you later. Now, Cavada would later go to Libby Prison, he would get released, he'd write a book about his experience in Libby Prison, but due to his behavior at not only Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville, but here at Gettysburg, where he was supposed to be in command of the unit and was not around during the heavy combat or trying to avoid it in some fashion, he was now like pretty much blackballed, and he would eventually resign from the Army, which Collis, when he heard what had happened, because he was the colonel and Cavada was the lieutenant colonel, he's like, yeah, I endorse him resigning, because Collis was considering having him court-martialed for his lack of leadership here at Gettysburg. But it was somewhere in this area where Cavada just sat down and just pretty much gave up because he wanted to avoid being shot at. So that was the story of, but Captain Bowen then took the survivors of who he had and the flags and got them off the battlefield, and we're going to head back, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile up to the Pennsylvania Monument. And then we're going to stop there, and then we're going to move up to where they were reconsolidated for the 3rd day's battle. So follow us through the fields. Now down there to the left, I believe that's the Kadori farm. That's on the 3rd day. That's where Pickett would he would be with his command. So, all right, now we're actually going to beat brush, guys. So I guess we got to check for ticks when we're done. I think there was I don't know who said it, but I heard a story, it might have been on Ken Burns' The Civil War, where guys in like the 2nd Corps or something, they said something to the effect like, oh, there goes the 3rd Corps, like with their bands and everybody was playing, and hold on, I'm trying to look for a break in the fence. Oh, there's one. They were, there they go out, you know, like implying that they shouldn't have been doing it, and one of the generals said, don't worry, they'll come tumbling back. Oh. And that's what happened. They came tumbling back. I think there's a break in the fence right there.
Yeah.
Might be a trail over there too. All right, now we retreat. All right, we're running away. I think there's a break up here we'll go through. Actually, where we're at right now is July 3rd. This is where, I forget what unit. They were a supporting brigade over here to the right side.
Yeah.
For Pickett's charge. But we'll go right through here. Yeah, we're actually right there. There's the Pennsylvania Monument. Watch out, there's a log there. Trying to find a break in the fence here. There's one right there. Be nice if there was a trail that would go straight through there, you know? Just so you know, most of our events aren't usually like this. But you can see how far we've come, like across the way. I mean, like we did a big loop right now, but that's pretty much what the 114th went through on the afternoon of July 14th. But they weren't just coming up where we are. They were all through here, like guys, not just them, but all kinds of Third Corps guys were just breaking contact and falling back. All right, everybody. So now we're using our other camera. Wes, sit forward a little. Thank you. After they were defeated on the 2nd of July, the Zouaves came across the field and they reconsolidated in the vicinity of the Pennsylvania Monument, which is, I don't know, maybe about half a mile down the road here from us. They set up in a position right behind the angle, which we're going to pan around here in a second. And Captain Bowen, who would eventually become Major Bowen, was now in command. He had roughly 65 guys out of the nearly almost 400 guys that started on the 2nd. And that's all that was left. They were in a secondary support position during Pickett's charge on the 3rd of July. They were never engaged. They helped the Philadelphia Brigade that was up at the angle later collect weapons and police the battlefield afterwards. This is where they ended the battle of July 3rd for the 114th Pennsylvania. So if you pan it around west. Up on the other side there where the tree is, that's like where the angle is located at, where Pickett's charge was, and that's where the main line was, the shooting was going on. Okay, next shot we're going to go up to the cemetery and we're going to see Collis's grave along with some of the unknown Zouaves. Okay, everybody, we're at the National Cemetery. We showed you where some of the unknown Zouaves are buried. We're at the grave of Charles Collis. After the war, he eventually would settle here in Gettysburg. Even though he didn't fight here, he did settle here, and he was buried here. This will end our day. Special thanks to Chris Grimsley from Yellow Hill Photography. He was walking with us today. Most of the good film and the good video and audio was through him, and I'm using the not so good camera. So thanks to him. If you guys are interested in some work or some historical information, reach out to Chris. I'm sure he would be happy to work with you. Our next event will be on the 23rd of August at the North Central Railroad in New Freedom, Pennsylvania. You can buy tickets, and we're going to be doing some skirmishing there. The 24th of August, as well as the 30th and 31st of August, we're going to be at the Williams Grove Historical Steam Engine Association. We're just going to be doing a living history there as well. So if you like our content, please give us a like, subscribe. If you're interested in reenacting, just reach out to us through our Facebook page. We're more than happy to have you. We are growing in numbers. We started with the Fantastic Four, and now we might be up to 7, possibly 8. I'm talking to a guy about joining the band. So we might be, if you can play a musical instrument, reach out to us. We need drummers, cornets, buglers. We can find a place for you. So reach out to us. We'd love to have you. And if you don't want to join and just want to come see us, please come out. We love talking to you guys and teaching about Collis and his amazing Zouave. Have a great day.